Stop motion is an animation technique which manipulates objects in a physical way to make them move independently. These objects can consist of people, models, and household items. The way this technique is achieved is by taking a picture of the scene and then move specific details ever so slightly and take another picture, then repeat the process. This creates a very quirky and distinct animation style which is made more fluent the smaller the changes are. Persistence of vision is the theory that the human eye is believed to only see the difference in frame rate up until 24 frames per second. But since the recent progression of video games, it has been proven as a myth because there is a noticeable difference between 30 and 60 FPS and 60 to 120 FPS. Frame rates are the frequency at which an imaging device produces consecutive images called frames, and there are many different types for different mediums and regions. Standard films are at 24 frames per second, American film 29 FPS, European film 25 FPS, and stop motion 12 FPS. But recently stop motion companies have been trying to achieve 24 FPS, which is literally double the work, so frame rate capabilities are constantly increasing. The phenakistoscope was one of the earliest animation devices, but was significantly more developed than its predecessors. It was invented in 1831 by Joseph Plateau. The device consisted of a disc with several images drawn around the edge, with slots cut out on a separate disc closer to the center. To get the animation effect, the image disc is spun in front of a mirror whilst the user looks through the slots. This breaks up the image and creates a flowing motion which appears as an animation. The concept for the zoetrope was conjured in 1834 by George Horner and was marketed in the 1860s. The zoetrope worked in the same way as the phenakistoscope, but was cylindrical rather than a two-dimensional circle. This meant that the operator did not have to use a mirror like the phenakistoscope because of its shape. Then came the praxinoscope. Invented in 1877 by Charles-Émile Renal, the praxinoscope is very similar to the zoetrope in its design, with the use of a cylindrical base, but instead of slits to break up the images, the praxinoscope uses mirrors, which makes the experience less tedious than its predecessor. Made in 1892, the kinetoscope was developed by an employee of Thomas Edison, William Kennedy Dixon. The device used a reel of pictures controlled by the handle on the side of the machine. As the handle was cranked, the images would appear to move seamlessly, creating a short film. Georges Méliès was the first person to implement stop frame in his films. The stop frame technique was created accidentally whilst George was filming. He turned off his camera as an object was removed from the set, which portrayed the illusion of an object disappearing. This technique can be seen in all of his films, most famously A Trip to the Moon, where stop frame was used in order to speed up movement, like so. Willis O'Brien was an American stop-motion animator, born March 2nd, 1886. His fame began with one of his first major stop-motion pictures, The Lost World in 1925, which astounded audiences due to the scale and visual effects. Later, Willis created the infamous King Kong in 1933, which would later spawn many remakes. The film combined footage from actual scenes and merged them together with the stop motion so that they could actually integrate the actors into the fantastical world. Ray Harryhausen was infatuated with Willis O'Brien ever since he saw King Kong. He then started to experiment with animation shorts. One of his friends arranged a meeting with O'Brien for him. O'Brien critiqued Harryhausen's early models and urged him to take classes in graphic arts and sculpture to hone his skills. Soon after, Harryhausen worked on Mighty Joe Young, a sequel to King Kong, made by the same team, which began his long career as an animator. Harryhausen went on to make mythological greats like Jason and the Argonauts, which was an incredibly detailed film. From the story to the models, everything is incredible. Later, stop motion began to be a lot more technical, and was used more for difficult to execute parts of a film, such as the movement of the AT-ATs within Star Wars, which are so smooth and crisp that I didn't even notice despite multiple viewings. This can also be seen in the film Alice, constructed entirely in stop motion in 1988 by Jan Spankmeyer, which adapted the Alice in Wonderland books into a visual fantasy. Then a company called Aardman began to innovate the medium. Aardman began their animation in the 70s using claymation, with a simple show called Greeblies, which was the inspiration for Morph. A simple clay character with huge curiosity for the world around him. Despite its basic framework, Morph was very successful. Later came Wallace and Gromit, an absolute masterpiece of animation, which gave the characters more purpose with the use of script, story and a great use of humour. From here, Aardman made movies such as Chicken Run and Flushed Away, which has made them the giants of stop motion. But is all of this success enough to keep the medium alive, when now there are companies like Disney and Pixar making animation using CGI? I think it is. For starters, stop motion has a very interesting look to it, which simply can't be matched by any CGI. And literally anyone can create stop motion because of how cheap and easy the process is. Granted, it is very time consuming, but CGI would take most of that time just to learn it, and the expenses are just too great for independent filmmakers, and this is why I think the technique will live on, for now.